Hello, Mr. Bolt. We have an important assignment for you this time.
I'm listening.
I think you know what to do with this.
No. I'm not ready for this.
You don't have a choice. You've put it off long enough. Now it's time to face your worst nightmare.
Transformers Energon. Energon was the very first Transformers series I ever watched, and was sadly the thing that got me into the franchise. I owe all of this, to this. Today, I'm going to be talking about why this piece of shit is one of the worst things ever created by humankind. It's been a long time coming. So in this special episode of Ruined Forever, we tackle evil incarnate. Transformers Energon. I don't even know where to begin with Energon. It's so bad that every aspect of it deserves its own segment. Babe, where do you think I should start?
I'm not talking to you.
Oh, come on. Are you still pissed about my Bayformers video?
You were mean.
The world is a cruel place, Bay. The show is an absolute mess. It is so horrendously rushed, and it just feels incomplete and broken. What with characters appearing out of nowhere, random pauses in between the awful dialogue, and the horrible editing. Honestly, the show is embarrassing. People actually looked at this and said, yeah, this is fine. Yeah, this is great, guys. The show is so much worse than I thought. When I went to rewatch the series for the sake of research of this video, which nearly killed me by the way, here's a picture of me in hospital dying of cancer because of this show, I found Energon wasn't just bad. It wasn't just terrible. It is a crime to humanity, and no, I'm not exaggerating. So grab some popcorn and strap yourselves in, because this is going to be a long one, as we delve into why I think Transformers Energon is one of the worst things in existence. The show looks absolutely abysmal. But hey, don't take my word for it. Listen to the experts at WatchMojo instead.
With the character models fully computer generated, this is one to check out for the stunning visuals alone.
It never gets old. Granted, Transformers Armada didn't exactly have the most beautiful art style, with its 2D animation constantly riddled with animation errors and lazy designs. Even it is more visually pleasing than Energon. I mean, the shit I did in the toilet yesterday was more visually pleasing than Energon, but still. This is because Energon attempted to try something different, combining the traditional 2D anime animation with absolutely horrible 3D animation. And this isn't a case of the animation looking bad by today's standards. No, it was horrible for the time as well. Hell, even Beast Wars looked better than this shit, and that came out 8 years prior, and that show was entirely 3D animated. So why does Energon look so bad? The 3D animation makes the characters look bland, and it horrifically restricts their movement. Look at this run cycle, it's hilarious. It made all of the bots' movements stiff and jerky, and considering that the entire show looked like this, it made it even more unbearable to watch. The thing that bothers me the most is that the 2D animation isn't actually that bad. The humans, barring Kicker of course, because Kicker, are actually all pretty well animated. I personally have never felt that 3D animation and 2D animation in the same cartoon or anime have ever really blended well, and even that 3D anime comes off looking as jerky and awkward. I understand that it is much easier to animate than 2D, but it mostly just stands out way too much for the two styles to blend well. This is especially true in Energon's case, where the 2D characters stick out an awful amount when compared to the 3D animation that dominates the show. It's only really recently that 3D anime has begun to actually look decent, and unfortunately that was way after Energon's time. Energon's characters move so awkwardly that it hurts. It's so horrendously lazy, and you can tell just by looking at it that just about no effort went into the entirety of the show at all. I mean, for God's sake, the same friggin' explosion effect is copy and pasted every time someone gets shot. No, I'm not kidding. Every single time! The animation made it look as if none of the characters had weight, and that wasn't just when they were in space. Every single bot just floated as if they weren't a giant robot, and it just looked so unnatural. I could make something better in Microsoft Paint while I'm drunk. The 3D animation was incredibly limited, preventing any of the bots actually showing any emotion whatsoever aside from a blank and empty stare. The solution to this was for the animators to randomly switch to hand-drawn animation in order to show the characters expressing some kind of emotion, and it looks pretty good. It's actually genuinely well animated. I'm serious. Look at this scene where Megatron is torturing Inferno, for example. This goes to show that Energon potentially could have actually looked good. Hell, it could have been an improved version of Armada. Now, while it can't be guaranteed that the whole show could have looked as good as the random 2D bits in Energon, especially considering how lazy most of the 2D animation is the rest of the time, I mean, for God's sake, look at these mouth flaps. At the very least, the show could have looked a hell of a lot better had it been animated like this. Hell, the 3D animation is so fucking bad that scenes where Ironhide transforms and goes all teary-eyed needed to be done in hand-drawn animation. Because it was physically impossible to portray dynamic movement with these absolutely garbage 3D models. If there's anything I can commend Energon on, it's the fact that the 20 seconds of total 2D animation in the entire show is actually pretty good. It goes to show that even the animators of the show knew how terrible the 3D animation looked, but I guess it must have been halfway through development when they realized it was too late to change it. Whatever the case, I think we can all agree that the decision to animate the show entirely in 3D was a terrible one. Basically, had the animators not had only a pack of gum and cocaine as their budget, and decided that 2D animation would have been the best way to go, Energon may have actually looked good. But no, instead we get cars awkwardly sliding through space and around roads.
Cartoon Network presents a 6-hour marathon of Transformers Energon.
May God help you. Energon's flimsy concept of what a plot is nothing but an absolute joke. For some reason, like Armada before it, Energon was required to fill 52 episodes. 52 episodes of this garbage! This isn't Beast Machines with only 26 episodes. No. Energon got 52 fucking episodes! Over 18 hours of this bullshit! 18! While the show initially had some semblance of a story to follow, following Megatron being revived in his quest to resurrect Unicron, this goal was achieved by episode 20. Unicron was restored, and the Autobots had something to fight for a bit. Sadly though, even Energon's writers couldn't find a way to pad this bullshit out for another 32 episodes, and so after a while, the Autobots managed to destroy Unicron once more. So what happens from there? Well, the show completely repeats itself. Yes, really. Unicron's resurrected again, the Autobots step in again, and then the Planet Eater is destroyed. For the third time! And even that wasn't enough to unnecessarily stretch the plot out. So after that, the writers just make up some random bullshit to pad the rest of the show out. They were so desperate to stretch out the plot that there's an episode where they just race. It's not important to the rest of the story, it just happens. They just race. Energon doesn't have plot. It has absolutely no idea what it's doing. And because of this ridiculously long amount of episodes, the show had to pad its time out with as much random crap as possible to ensure that the show wasn't over in 10 episodes, which it very well could have been. So the show is filled with an incredulous amount of characters standing around and talking, and as painfully slow as possible. And of course, being an anime and all, containing a ridiculous amount of stock footage to pad out action scenes. And we're not talking like 10-second transformation sequences, some of these are about 20 seconds each, and then add on top the fact that there's about 5 per episode, reducing these supposedly exciting battle scenes to boring waste of time, much like the entire show is. One of the most frustrating examples of how awful the plot is the case of Shock Blast, a character set up to be this insane and psychotic being who was supposed to be part comic relief and part badass villain, both of which he was not. Well, after he dies, he's replaced by his brother Sixshot, who is the exact same as he is in every single way. Essentially, Shock Blast could have just undergone a color change, because nothing at all changed when Sixshot showed up. I think it was something that Mobile Suit Gundam 00 pulled off as well. Kill off character only to replace him with essentially identical brother. It's not clever, guys, it's absolutely pathetic storytelling. Initially, the concept of the show was interesting, serving as a direct sequel to Armada and continuing on from the show left off 10 years later. It featured most of the Decepticons scattered and working for the Autobots. The Autobots are no longer hiding from the humans, but instead working with them, setting up various cities on Earth, the Moon, and Mars, and some of the bots from Armada return in all new bodies and roles, including Prime, of course, Hotshot, Jetfire, Tidal Wave, Demolisher, and Cyclonus. Megatron's corpse from Armada shows up, which was pretty cool, and even the humans from Armada show up, albeit in incredibly minor roles, but at the very least they're still there. Unicron's head even serves as the base for Alpha Q. It was a very interesting where are they now scenario, where a time skip shows what happened following the events of Armada. However, Energon doesn't really do anything with it. None of the personal conflicts or issues from the previous show carried over, which I'll get to shortly. A lot of loose ends left over from Armada just disappear, however. I mean, where the hell are the minicons? Remember how important they were? What happened to Red Alert? Hoist? Blur? I mean, I can't blame them for not wanting to be in Energon. I guess they ran away when they found out that the Autobots were hanging out with this piece of shit. Character development? What the hell's that? I'm just some guy that lives on the side of the street that they hired to write for this show. I don't know what I'm doing. The plot and translation issues of Energon are so bad that it made it physically impossible for any of the incredibly bland and one-dimensional characters to have any form of growth whatsoever. In fact, it seemed like the writers put more effort trying to avoid developing the characters in Energon than they did actually developing them. Because apparently characters learning lessons and growing as people is too difficult for the writers, who very clearly just wanted a paycheck and then to get the hell out of there. Granted, character development is not an easy thing to do, but even the most basic of character growth is neglected in Energon. Even freaking Armada did it, in some situations better than others, sure, but Energon seems completely incapable. They introduce personal conflicts for the characters to have, and despite how poorly written and executed they are due to the god-awful voice acting, at the very least, it shouldn't be hard for these issues to be resolved. But they never are. TF Wikinet lists some good examples of this. One example is Demolisher, who, after the disbanding of the Decepticons at the end of Armada, joined the Autobot side, despite still holding a grudge against the Autobots. When Megatron comes back, he questions what side to join. Ooh, look! A personal conflict. So what does Energon do with that? Have him die, and then be brought back to life as the worst comic relief ever with amnesia, so said personal conflicts are now completely gone. What about Inferno, who struggles against the Decepticon programming given to him by Megatron? Somehow. Well, that conflict is resolved when he kills himself, and because no one in Energon can actually die properly, he was brought back as Roadblock, and then did nothing for the rest of the series, aside from serve as something to put in the background. It is worth mentioning that Inferno actually had some form of personality initially. Well, not anymore! Wingsaber holding a grudge against Shock Blast for killing his friend? Well, the writers essentially forgot about it once Shock Blast escapes captivity. What, did Wingsaber just stop caring? Oh, and in the first 2 episodes when the writers weren't on crack, Kicker had a hatred of Transformers after being scarred for life as a kid. Okay, fair enough. Well, guess what else the writers forgot about? The show devolves characters. No one grows or develops. They get worse. As time went on, it felt that the writers just stopped giving a shit altogether. Even Ironhide's stupid fan club that shows up for absolutely no reason dies within an episode, and their death had no bearing on Ironhide whatsoever. It just happens. The worst offense is the inclusion of Starscream. There was a Starscream in the toy line, and so Energon was obligated to include him in the show. Thing is, Starscream had died in Armada after a tragic turnaround and redemption arc. So what did Energon do? Bring him back as a ghost with amnesia that did essentially nothing in the show. Megatron didn't seem to remember what had happened to him, and neither did Starscream. Essentially, no one acknowledged Starscream's revival at all, aside from calling him by his name. So the tragic ending of the relationship of Alexis and Starscream went to complete waste, as Alexis was barely even in Energon, and the two of them never even met. That could have made an amazing episode or arc where the two reunite, with Alexis desperately trying to restore Starscream to his former self. But no, instead, Starscream was a prop for the show, and that was it. It was absolutely disappointing, and cracked all over the work of Armada's development of the character. The only semblance of character development in this entire godforsaken show is Ironhide and Scorponok's long-running feud, which is actually resolved in the show, in Superlink. Conveniently, this issue was solved in an episode that Energon omitted because they obviously found it too difficult to actually write plot. Now, while it's pretty blatantly obvious that a lot of Transformers shows merely exist to sell the toys that Hasbro produces, a lot of Transformers cartoons have done this quite well. Prime, for example, or even Beast Machines. 2 shows that don't blatantly shove the subliminal message of buy the toys in your face every 5 seconds like a show such as Cybertron does. Energon is a massive offender of this in the sense of not being very discreet. In fact, the show just feels like an extended advertisement due to the aforementioned constant reformatting of characters and the needless amount of stock footage. Energon shoves toy gimmicks and transformations constantly into episodes as blatantly as possible, and it's so lazy that it just feels like it's insulting you as a viewer. Energon is one of the few Transformers shows that doesn't take place on Earth most of the time, which is mainly because the animators couldn't be asked putting in proper backgrounds. So, because it was just the easiest thing to animate on, the show takes place mostly in space. And as most of the bots can fly in robot mode, none of the Transformers really have a reason to do their main gimmick, transform. But toys still need to be sold. How else will the viewer know that these Transformers actually transform? So the characters just randomly transform for absolutely no reason, and are sure to announce it whenever they do, just in case you weren't paying attention. And so episodes of Energon see cars and trucks just driving on space. What? Why? That doesn't even... And then in situations where transforming actually makes sense, they don't! Transform, you stupid... Oh, but it gets worse. Remember how I mentioned that toys could power link, as in two bots could combine together? Well, the show didn't forget, and ensured to needlessly combine two Autobots together for literally no good reason. The whole concept of power linking is that the two bots combined should become stronger together, give them improved firepower and abilities. But no, of course not. In Energon, the only thing power linking does is actually create less soldiers to fight the enemy. They don't gain any special abilities or do anything special. Power linking just happens. Ugh! The cast also sees random paint job changes in accordance with Hasbro's rules and regulations of selling toys, but unlike Armada's explanation for it, it made no sense whatsoever. It was just thrown in there for the sake of it being there. I mean, sure, Armada's didn't make that much sense, but at least they tried to come up with an explanation. Megatron becomes Galvatron because of course he does, but it's incredibly poorly done, as opposed to Armada and Cybertron's versions of it. He just dips in a pool of Super Energon, Super Energon, and change color. Boom, now he's Galvatron. The Maximus Combiner teams introduced late into the show are also rarely ever seen apart, leaving barely any indication that the Combiners are comprised of separate beings at all. I think Bruticus Maximus is only shown separately like once, and that's it. Excluding the literal 2 seconds they're visible in stock footage combination sequences. The rest of the time, these Combiners are just bigger bots who can shoot more. Now that was a botched attempt at marketing. The DVD I owned of Energon contained the first 4 episodes of the series. These episodes were actually pretty decent. In comparison to the rest of the show, that is. They had plot, they introduced exposition and characters, and at first it felt like Energon actually had a direction to go in. These 4 episodes were actually a pretty decent introduction to the series. I mean, they weren't good, but compared to the rest of the series, it felt like the people working on it actually knew what they were doing. Sadly, as time went on and Energon continued, it got progressively worse. Much worse. Energon didn't have to be this bad. In fact, the concepts and ideas behind the toy line are pretty cool. The toys themselves are actually the most well received of the 3 Unicorn Trilogy toy lines, and the ideas behind them are interesting. My favorite is the toy without a head. Yeah, I really love that one, guys, thanks. Autobots and Decepticons using Energon to power themselves up and power link with their teammates to increase their power. The designs were interesting and upgraded versions of their Armada selves, and the toy bios involving Megatron's resurrection weren't bad. They were honestly interesting ideas, and in the right hands they could have been done really well. Sadly though, it seems they were not put in the right hands. All of these ideas were put to good use in Dreamwave's Energon comic, which goes to show that the ideas surrounding Energon could have actually been done right had the development team not been on drugs the entire time. The comic brilliantly continues on from the ending of the Armada comic, actually explaining where the hell the minicons went, and tied up the loose ends that the Energon show forgot about. Its explanation for Starscream's resurrection actually made sense. Scorponok suffered for his crimes against Megatron, unlike in the show. The humans from Armada had an actual role instead of serving as minor background characters, and the comic, overall, was actually pretty cool, with twists and turns in the plot, and hell, an actual plot. The Dreamwave Energon comic showed that the ideas behind Energon potentially could have been made into an amazing show. But no, of course not. We had to get this instead. Oh, and the Energon comic was prematurely cancelled. Because of course it was. Energon doesn't have characters. It has toys that move around and shoot things. Essentially, none of the characters that return from Armada are the same. Optimus is a shittier version of himself from Armada without the personal conflicts or morals. I assume he traded in his character traits for the ability to somehow shoot lasers from all over his body. How does that even work? He's also got these 4 Prime Force drones that replace his old awesome super mode from Armada, but he uses them more often than not. This becomes a problem because the Prime Force are apparently made out of tissue paper, considering how quickly they get destroyed. That isn't a problem later on, however, as Optimus just ends up using Wing Saber as a power boost in armor, which sums up Wing Saber as a character pretty well. Hotshot may have been annoying in Armada, but at least he actually had a personality. In Energon, he's supposed to have aged, so he's become this serious and absolutely bland piece of garbage who does and says nothing in the entirety of the show. And the 3 humans, Rad, Alexis, and Carlos, have barely any screen time whatsoever. Rad is pretty much the same but older, Alexis doesn't do anything of importance, and I don't think I want to know what kind of drugs Carlos is on.
Holy free holies!
As previously mentioned, Demolisher found himself some personal conflict, which actually made him slightly interesting in the first few episodes or so, but from there his character just devolves until he dies and is brought back as a pathetic excuse for an advertisement. The same can be said for Cyclonus, who would later become Snowcat, and the two of them together are more deadly a force than Unicron himself. Because they're so annoying, they'll make you want to shoot yourself in the head.
There's this creep with like 4 heads and he's behind all this!
They are supposed to serve as the comic relief characters, but are, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, the single most irritating characters I've ever seen in anything in my entire life. They're not funny, they're not likable, and they don't bring balance to the serious side of the show. Energon is so confused that while it attempts to have this balance, it fails miserably. Tidal Wave also gets the devolution treatment, and is turned into Mirage, who in Super Link is super gay for Megatron. Energon has no idea how to translate this for American audiences, so he just comes off as super weird and just as annoying. As for the rest of the Decepticons, they all suck. Scorponok makes no sense half the time, and after Megatron comes back he becomes a little bitch who accomplishes nothing. All of the characters are more or less the same. Boring, bland, underdeveloped, and nonsensical. Energon also saw the introduction of the sometimes good guy, sometimes bad guy Alpha Quintesson, who initially opposes the Autobots and later becomes their ally. Or something, I really don't know. He served as the villain in the shadows initially in the show, not serving a side on either side of the war. But after a while, he faded into obscurity when the plot became messier and messier, and Energon just had absolutely no idea what to do with him, resulting in him shouting, "Our planet's kicker!" every 5 seconds he appeared. All I know is that he wanted to resurrect Unicron, which I think the writers forgot after a while, because he sure did. Also, all of the characters call him Alpha Q.
It was all Alpha Q's idea!
Alpha Q.
Alpha Q?
Alpha Q. Alpha Q. And then there's Kicker. Kicker and Ironhide deserve no introduction. We all know how bad they were. They made the show unbearable to watch. It was a combination of the atrocious voice acting, the incredibly horrific voices attributed to both characters,
Man, Mika, that is totally incredible.
and the fact that they spend about 50% of the show on screen being the main kid appeal characters, and you have a genuine reason to never want to watch this show. This whiny thing is not Ironhide. I refuse to call this piece of shit a name attributed to such a fantastic character in the past. No, you do not deserve the title of Ironhide.
Oh, wow. Can't believe Optimus said that. Just to be mentioned in the same breath as Hotshot is probably the greatest compliment in the universe.
How about you and Hotshot both fucking suck? Kicker is easily the worst human character in the entirety of Transformers, which is a pretty bold statement considering how shitty some Transformers characters have been in the past, but believe me, he is worse. His character is so horrifically inconsistent. 1 minute he's like, yeah, f*** you Autobots, woo! And then 2 seconds later he'll be all like, oh my god, Optimus, I'm sorry, help me, I suck so much, please save. And he also can't ever shut the hell up about his dad.
My dad was working on it too.
Dr. Jones is the most brilliant research scientist I know.
Come on, give me a break, would you?
Oh, so bad.
Hey, Bolt, open the case.
Huh? Why?
Trust me, open the DVD case.
Well, what if I don't want to?
Bolt, seriously, open it.
Alright, if you want.
Come on, give me a break, would you?
It's time for some revenge.
Where? Where am I? What the hell? Hello there. Who? What? Where are you, before you ask? What? You're inside your own head. You've gone into shock. Welcome to your subconscious. This place sucks. We're 4 different variations of yourself. You're me. What, did the face not give it away? Fair point. I'm the intelligent version of you. You don't use me very often. Ah, okay. Wait a minute. This here is the dumb version of you. Jab on them haters. That guy over there is the section of you that likes Transformers. There's a part of you that likes Transformers? Really? There are more than two genders. What about the puppet? That's Billy. I don't know what he represents. So, why am I here? Well, you have to get this video to half an hour somehow, don't you? What? I mean, Bay and Kicker are working to destroy you. Did they succeed? Because that hurt pretty bad. Well, you're here, aren't you? Fair point. So how do I get out? I'm gonna tear those two apart when I find them. All you need to do is wake up. Huh? Wake up, Bolt. Oh, come on, again?
Hello, Bolt.
Soundwave. Hi. How did I get here?
I brought you here. You were badly hurt.
Alright, well, thanks, but I have to go find Bay.
No, you finish off Energon.
What?
You need to finish the review, Bolt. It's the only way.
Well, I can't just sit around and do nothing. They're probably making shitty vlogs with my camera.
I will find Kicker and Bay. You worry about the video.
This doesn't change anything.
I didn't think it would, but this is bigger than us now. We have to stop those two before they unleash something even worse. Now go finish the review.
A very minuscule amount of things that are not absolutely abysmal in Energon is potentially the music. I will admit the music in Energon that carried over from Super Link is not that bad. The only issue with this is that the team working on Energon is so goddamn incompetent that they used the wrong music at the wrong time. Take the ending of the episode in Imprisoned Inferno, where the apparently sad ending scene has some happy music overlaid in the background. Wow. People also like to claim that the theme song of Energon is one of the only good parts about it, but I honestly fail to see how. It's not exactly anything special. I mean, it's better than Armada's excuse for a theme, sure, but it's kind of just Transformers more than Misty Eye. Now, if you didn't believe me before when I said that Energon was rushed, look at the comparison here of shots between Energon and Super Link. Animation was omitted in the dub simply because it wasn't finished, so things that the characters were talking about were completely absent, making the episode even more confusing. Stuff is just missing. How that was deemed acceptable is beyond me. And look at this shot here. This wasn't an actual officially licensed product and aired on television. It also goes to show how incredibly intelligent the people working on the show are when they allow such fantastic episode titles as Scorpionok, A Tale of Two Heroes, Imprisoned Inferno, and Deception Army. How little do you have to care to allow this to get through what I assume would be several layers of editing and checking? How does this happen? How did actual human beings allow this to become a Transformers product?
Terracons who were trying to steal the Energon away from us. My dad was working on it too.
Here we go.
Oh, come on, give me a break, would you? Holy cow! All right, doggy, sniff that Energon out for me.
I have a burning hatred for dubs of anime, not because I'm one of those people who believe that the original version is the only good version, but instead because of shows like Energon, that put so little effort into the voice lines that you can tell that absolutely no one working on the show gave even the slightest of shits. The voice acting and scripting is so incompetent in Energon that I genuinely take pity on the people who had to work on it and then slap their name on this piece of shit. But then I remember that they were most likely paid for their work and suddenly I feel rage. Transformers Energon is one of the laziest excuses of a cartoon series I have ever seen. The Japanese version of Energon, entitled Super Link, is not a good show. But in comparison to Energon, it's essentially a masterpiece. The animation is still bloody awful, but at least the dialogue and editing isn't as shitty as Energon is. So while Super Link didn't make much sense on its own, it's actually incredible how horribly the American team managed to butcher the dub of the show. A majority of the dialogue in the show is cliched bullshit. It's as if the scriptwriters thought, what's the laziest and most basic dialogue to put in scenes? I don't know, how about we repeat, let's do it, and we gotta do the thing about 5 times an episode, at least. The word Energon was apparently so fascinating to the scriptwriters that they included it as part of the dialogue several times per episode, which I assume is because they couldn't be bothered writing actual character dialogue.
I was actually researching the uses of Energon for peaceful purposes when it happened.
Our weapons are used for peaceful purposes.
The script is so basic and cliched, and includes the bare minimum of dialogue for characters to shout out the plot and goal as often as possible, and spout random lines of encouragement and anime garbage to make up about 60% of the episode's running time. The words being spoken rarely ever correlate with what's actually going on screen, which results in a confused and broken mess of a cartoon. Sometimes, characters say lines meant for other characters in their voice because the editors are f***ing idiots. A lot of the translated dialogue makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and it seems that the characters are just as confused as we are when watching the show. I genuinely think Energon would be easier to understand if you were watching it with the sound off. The voice acting in Energon is absolutely horrible, similar to that of Armada's before it, but worse. You can pretty much see how confused the voice actors were when reading their lines. Gary Chalk and David Kay, playing Optimus and Megatron, still at least try to deliver a decent performance, but their nonsensical lines just ends up making them sound like idiots. Brad Swale, who actually isn't that bad of a voice actor, does an incredibly appalling job as Kicker, as I previously mentioned. His performance is the reason I can never watch Death Note in English, due to Light Yagami's voice triggering my PTSD.
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
And of course, you could forget the fantastic dialogue. While Super Link isn't exactly perfect, with the show being arguably one of the worst Japanese Transformers shows, it at least makes sense in Japan. The cartoon doesn't take itself too seriously like most Japanese Transformers cartoons, and has enough anime ridiculousness and charm to work. The exaggerated situations just seem to fit in Super Link and feel a lot more natural. This may be why the dub of Energon makes no sense. It was simply too difficult to translate to American audiences, and that really does seem to be the case here, with snippets of Japanese humor making their way into Energon without any of the context that made them funny in the first place. Whoever worked on the translation was obviously so high that no one dared approach him and question whether his translations were correct, because their work results in Cliffjumper and Downshift having each other's names switched more often than they're actually correctly titled, the character Misha having about 3 different variations of her name, and shit like Optimus pulling Hot Shot's blaster out of his chest. Wait, what? It was the same situation with Megatron's sword that the show obsessed over in the first 10 or so episodes. When was this Megatron sword exactly? Both examples of the dub team's incompetency, causing them to make up a nonsensical explanation for these weapons that we've never seen before. A lot of Super Link's decent ideas and lessons are absolutely butchered in Energon. A lot of important information was lost in the dub due to how horrible the translation is, and so details like Alpha Q's relationship with Scorponok and several cultural jokes were lost. An example of this is the episode Distribution, in which the Autobots and Cons have a random Dragon Ball Z style tournament for reasons that escape me, at least in Energon. The reason for its existence in Japan was to commemorate it being the 500th Transformers episode, including all shows before it, and so as a result was not taken seriously at all. This episode breaks the fourth wall a lot in Super Link, making references to the Super Link exclusive commercial bumpers, and even has characters like Bulkhead talking directly to the audience. But because Energon was produced by a bunch of mentally disabled monkeys, this episode instead becomes a nonsensical mess where nothing makes sense at all, due to none of the running gags in Super Link that were exploited in this episode having a place in the dub. It was genuinely sad to watch. Maybe we should all take a leaf out of Cybertron's book and forget that this abomination of a show existed.
Holy cow!
They're here.
Bolt, it's time to end this.
I found them.
Yeah, I noticed.
Come out and face me, Bolt.
Oh, come on, give me a break, would ya?
What, aren't you happy with your new boyfriend?
He is not my boyfriend.
Oh, come on, give me a break.
Is he a Pokemon or something?
Bolt, shoot at them.
This is a plastic gun, it doesn't actually...
Bolt, shoot at them.
Oh,
It doesn't have to be like this, babe.
yes it does.
Yay.
You have subjected me to so much abuse.
No, I haven't. Ah, yeah, right.
Now Kicker and I will destroy you.
Not gonna happen. Ready, Soundwave?
I guess.
Let's go!
Oh. Wait, Bolt. I'm sorry. I was just sick of people telling me my movies were bad. We can work through this.
Yeah, you know what, Michael? It's okay. I forgive you, buddy.
Really?
No. And now I never have to worry about annoying side characters ever again. Let's go, Soundwave.
After all is said and done, you've never walked, you've never run. You're a winner. You got the moves. You know the streets. Break the rules. Take the heat. You're nobody's fool. You're at your best when the going gets rough. You've been put to the test, but it's never enough. You got the touch. You got the power. When all hell's breaking loose, you'll be riding the eye of the storm.